Well, hello and welcome to Choose to Chat, and really delighted to welcome today Sharon Morrow. So welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Stephen.
Well, it's great to have you with us, Sharon. I primarily know Sharon through the Council on Social Responsibility of the Methodist Church. I just love Sharon's energy and thought and insight in many things. But she's originally from a neighbouring county to my home county. So maybe anyway, Sharon, do you want to tell us something about your background and where you're from and stuff?
Okay, so I originally grew up in Donegal town, and my parents now live. We lived in the town for most of my years up until I was a teenager, and then we moved to just outside the town. Some who visit Donegal town will know the Mill Park Hotel, so we live just beyond that in a very nice spot, if I say so myself. So I am the oldest of five. So I have three sisters, there's four girls, and a brother who's the youngest, who is currently living in Melbourne with his wife. So we don't get to see him as much as the others. And my mum and dad are still alive. And my mother was a Methodist local preacher. So when I was growing up, there would have been all of these books of Romans and concordance and all the rest of it on the table as she was getting her sermons ready for Sunday mornings. And I suppose in the years where I was growing up, we would have had a very active Sunday school in Donegal Town Methodist Church. So right. Those who are familiar with that, it's a beautiful little church just right beside the river, across the bridge. And so that's where we have always gone to church there. And my dad was a Methodist and my mother was a Methodist from our draft originally. So that's both sides of my parents' families have a history of being Methodists as well. So I don't know if am I allowed to call myself a true blue? if both my parents are Methodists. Yeah. And so we were brought up like that. My dad's aunt was Aunt Ella, was a Sunday school teacher, and did so. She was a school teacher as well as our Sunday school teacher, and taught us all our Bible stories. And then as when she left and we moved into getting ready for our preparation, we learned our catechisms. And I still remember my little blue book and all that and bits of it as well. You'd be amazed when you pull out the wee blue book how much you actually remember. Okay. And then along with all of that, we had good news clubs. Like we were blessed in our upbringing. And blessed to have been brought up in such a Christian house as well, and relatives and family and friends who were all Christians too. Like, you know, there was a lady at home who was very good friends with my mom, and many will remember her, Heather Colvin, who was a lovely lady, Heather, and would come in and visit us and bring us in wee pamphlets and leaflets and stuff. Then we had CEF, so we had Alan Graham. Was based in Donegal. He was based in Letterkenny, but once a week, every Wednesday, Alan used to travel down to Donegal town and hold a good news club, and we all went to that for years, and learned our memory verses and learned about the missionaries, you know, Hudson Taylor, all those, Amy Carmichael, all those great stories and heroes of the past. So that was, we were steeped in it. So we were brought up in that. And like no better grounding really could you get as a child. And then during our summers, we spent our summers down in Duncan Ailey Hall on mattresses on the floor at camp with Joe Kennedy and from Sligo and his wife Mabel. And we would spend our summers down in Fintra and Inver Beach and anywhere else with the camps, the summer camps. And then during the summer as well, we had holiday Bible clubs, and we had the beach mission. So, you know, I wanted for nothing spiritually as a child growing up. It was a wonderful upbringing.
Powerful. And I mean, that's, like you say, a wonderful upbringing and many things that just the depth and that you're given in that childhood and many things I can identify with there. And And funny, when I was doing the Tuesday chat with David Nixon, he referred to CEF camps in Ballina as well. And I'm pretty sure that my first camp that I attended as a child, probably was 8 or 9 or something at the time, was in Ballina Hall. So maybe we even passed each other at that point.
Yeah.
Sharon. But that grounding, and I think also the aspect in these Good News Clubs and camps of learning about missionary stories as children, I think it's just something maybe we don't value now like that, and maybe that has little worked its way out in your own life and in your own thinking in different ways, but maybe we'll come to that in a moment. Do you want to say anything about your development, where maybe in your teens and early adulthood, where you saw yourself going in life and thinking about where life was taking you?
Yeah. Well, I didn't. I didn't know where I was going. So I went and I did my leaving cert. I didn't really know. I was kind of betwixt and between, would I be a teacher, would I be a nurse?
Yeah.
Anyway, I settled on nursing. And at the time, the Adelaide Hospital was still up and running in Dublin.
Right.
And so I went and trained in the Adelaide, which was, I had the choice of Letterkenny or other places as well to do my nurse training. And it really was God's guidance that sent me to the Adelaide, because I met some wonderful Christian friends there, and people with a similar background, I suppose, to myself, and similar values. So it stood me. It was a really good place to do my training, and fantastic care for patients as well. I was taught very well in my nursing in the Adelaide. And while I was there, I kept up the summer camps. So I would still give a week of my summer holidays and go to Lissadale. That's where we were at the time in Sligo. And then
I'm sure it's crazy because of course I was helping at camps in Lissadale, so
I'm sure past across, if we look back in old photos, we'll see.
How could I not have remembered you from that point? Sure.
And we did camp leaders, and obviously as camp leader, you have your own dorm and you're leading them in their studies and their morning prayers and their evening prayers as well. I used to get the job of teaching the missionary story. When we were at camp, Alan usually got me to do that. So it just means, like, Mary Slessor and Hudson Taylor was one of my favorites. I love Hudson Taylor. And it was fantastic opportunity and a privilege to be able to stand there in a room full of 40 children and teach them, about such great men and women. So and it also strengthened me. I would learn a lot for myself as well when I was at those camps, and to come back into work then, and back into nursing, it just gave you a foundation, a base really to live your life from. So I've been very blessed. I can't, I know there are people who have some very tough times and some tough stories, and I can only say that my life has been a blessing. And maybe back to your point, that's why I'm so, I suppose, so insistent on trying to give back. Because I have received so many blessings myself along the way. I went and worked in Australia for a year, because most nurses do or did when I was that age. And that makes you, I suppose, I grew up when I went to Australia, because you become very independent. You have to, you're on your own, you're on the other side of the world, and you have to manage yourself. And there's a lot of good life lessons for people in doing something like that as well. But as soon as my visa was up, I had the Adelaide on the phone asking me when she's coming back. So I was back. I'd say I stepped off the plane in the following week. I had hardly time to get over the jet lag. I was back into the Adelaide. So
tremendous. And is nursing for you, I mean, how do you see nursing in the outworking of faith? I mean, we see it as, it's important for every Christian to see, no matter what they're doing, that it's a living out of their faith. Does nursing in particular have just something of how you see caring for others? Is it an expression of God through you? Just any.
Yeah, well, it was, you know, it was part and parcel of Jesus' ministry.
Yeah.
So, you know, you like, as you read the Gospels, it's like he healed as he went, really, and preached. But healing was a huge part of what he did. And he always, you know, he looked after people's basic needs. So, you know, he fed them. He fed a lot of them,
Yeah.
5,000 and plus. But you know, Jesus was very aware that, you know, people are sick, people are unwell, they're in pain, people are hungry. And so, as well as preaching the gospel to them and looking after their, you know, saying to them from a spiritual point of view and salvation, he was also looking after their own physical needs as well as everything else. So, do I see nursing as an outreach of my faith, or is it a manifestation of what I believe? Absolutely. And I was chatting to someone not that long ago who said, really, it's about love. And it's showing love to another human being, so that you know, there's no better. To me, it's in a way, it's a privilege that somebody would allow me to do the things that I do to them in my nursing career.
Yeah.
To trust me to do that, and to make themselves very vulnerable as well. And you know, for somebody who might have been particularly very private, to just, you know, it's an awful thing really to be sick in a hospital, because you have to put your dignity and so on all to one side. And you know, to have somebody that you've never met before, a complete stranger, and to put your trust into that. So I think, you know, there's no better way, really. I think nursing's a great way to show your faith.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sharon. Now, in nursing, you've sort of, I'm trying to avoid the phrase "worked your way up," but you've got involved in sort of various different management. And do you want to tell us about some of the roles that you've had? I think at the moment you're in a bit of a transition to a new job, but do you want to tell us about the roles you've had?
I tend to move. I tend to move about every 3.5 to 4 years. So any future employers, I hope they're not watching this. They're counting down my contract. But it's more just to keep myself active. So if I find, you know, they say it's a year to learn a job, it's a year to kind of to master the detail in it, a year to become comfortable in it, and then really at that stage, once I start finding getting comfortable in a role, I'll move on. So I was on the wards for a while, and as a ward manager, a ward sister, and then I moved into a different role in practice development for nursing. And then at the time I'd started to do an MBA, and I was having coffee with the director of nursing at the time, the matron, and I was saying to her, how can I get the most out of doing this course, because it's a tough course. It was in UCD, and so she said, oh, you really need to be managing budgets more now and move into a more managerial role. And that was kind of the start of it, really. And I've moved into various different management roles along the way. So I was the deputy CEO in Calais Hospital for a while. That was a very busy role. I was the CEO of the Children's Hospice for a while. I looked after the national programs in the HSE for a while. And so I've had, I tend to move into very different roles, as in I like a nice change. So sometimes I have a team to manage, sometimes I'll have an executive team, and sometimes the team is me. So it's and I'm managing up as opposed to managing down. So I'm a board and so on. But it's all nice variety, and it's all, as I tell people, it's a risk, but you know, I pray a lot about it before I take a job. And the job that I was in at the moment, I'm in it nearly 5 years. And so I was praying, you know, where to next? Because I didn't really know what was next for me. Where to next, God? You know, what job do you want me to go into next? And then I happened to be in an airport about 4 weeks ago and having a conversation with someone on one of those red-eye flights who said to me, you didn't apply for such and such a job. And I went, no, I didn't even see it. And she said to me, oh, I think the interviews are over. They were supposed to be this week, but I'll make an inquiry. And she made an inquiry, and the interviews have been postponed because the chairman had COVID. Anyway, I had a series of screening interviews and CVs and all the rest of it. And before I knew where I was on a Monday afternoon, I had an interview, and a subsequent interview and another interview, and ended up getting the role. But it all happened in the space of about 2 weeks, and I was there. Well, there's my prayers answered. That's the job that he wants me to be in. And so I'll be taking that up in September.
Brilliant. And like, maybe just my imagination, it would be that a lot of these roles would be quite pressurized, or would they be stressful, and you're talking about praying and into all of this. Like, do you want to, where have they been stressful?
Yes, they have. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I remember one day, and I'm sure anyone around Calais will remember this, that Lewis had banged into one of the substations and had knocked out some of the electricity in the area, and had damaged. Now, obviously, this has been rectified since, but the area on the grid that Calais Hospital was on, it knocked out. Whatever it did, there's supposed to be a kick-in mechanism on the generators in the hospital, but the generators didn't kick in because they thought there was nothing wrong with the power coming. Anyway, I leave that to electricians to explain that a whole lot better. But the particular substation that went out in the hospital was the substation that covered ICU, the emergency department, and the theatres. So if you're designing a hospital, it's probably not best practice to have them all sitting on the one substation, and they're your three most critical areas. So I was in charge, and it was my responsibility to call a major incident and to lead that major incident. And obviously, you have patients in ICU that are ventilated, that are on, each of those ventilators has a certain amount of battery life. You need to make a decision. You have about 90 minutes to 2 hours to decide whether you're going to evacuate those patients or leave them where they are and hope that your electricians will get your generators working again. And the theatres as well, obviously you have to just wind up whatever cases are in there. So it was very pressurized. But I remember beside my office was a little toilet, and I remember going, just give me a minute, I'm just running in here. And I remember going in there and closing the door and going, praying and asking God, please help me and give me wisdom and calmness and guidance to make the right decisions at the right time to keep everybody safe. And so, do I think those things are important? Yes, I do. And we got out of it, and it worked itself out fine. There were learnings from it. We've certainly extended the battery life on a lot of our equipment in ICU. But nobody died, and everyone was safe. So do I think prayer is important in moments like that? Yes, absolutely. And in every other thing as well. You just never know. There's not a day in a big hospital where you're walking around and you just don't know what's going to come in the door. There are days when we've haven't had enough ventilators in ICU because of things that are coming in, and we're under a lot of pressure. All of those things. So to start my day, to end my day, and during my day in prayer, I think is I probably wouldn't be able to do those jobs without it.
Yeah, powerful. Thank you for sharing all that, Sharon. And then you've been involved in plenty of things overseas. I mean, and using your skills and your gifting elsewhere. So now I'm probably only aware of the surface. So I know you've been to a number of African countries using your expertise. Do you want to say anything about those things?
Yeah, I suppose these things kind of come about as in, if I find I'm getting idle, stuff seems to arrive. So it's,
I can't imagine you being idle.
So I tend to get if there is a downtime, God seems to fill it very well. And I have no problem with that. So I had a good friend, Deirdre Lang, who had mentioned to me about the jungle in Calais. Would I be interested in going out and working in the jungle and doing working in the caravans, the first aid caravans? And you know, that was, I don't know how many years ago when the jungle was there. And I've been going out, as you know, you've come with me. We've been going out ever since to Calais to support the refugees there. And then I would be a supporter of open doors as well. And certainly the plight of persecuted Christians is something that's very close to my heart. And have visited Iraq with them at the time, and to see the work that they were doing there, particularly with the Christians from the likes of Erbil and further up, who had taken to the mountains really, and were living in huts up there after ISIS had basically moved them, chased them out of their homes, and where else? And then Africa, I suppose Africa's more down to my relatives. My sister and her husband lived in Africa, lived in Malawi for about 6 months, part of his GP rotation. And my sister's a nurse as well. And so they've always kept connections there. And then there were, I suppose I just got, as these things happen, you get roped into these things. And I was willingly roped in. I have to say I really enjoy working with them at my time in Malawi. So we try and get every 2 years, we usually try and visit Malawi, and then the year in between, we try and bring them here so that and they can stay with us and see how we deliver healthcare over in this part of the world. So, but yeah, anything you'd be amazed where I might turn up or what. And then I suppose I'm on the board of Tear Fund, and Tear Fund do fantastic work, both in emergency relief, but also in eradicating orphanages. So there's, orphanages in the likes of Thailand and Cambodia are very different to orphanages here. And in a lot of cases, the children that are in orphanages in places like Cambodia, their parents are alive, but their parents are encouraged to send their children to the orphanage on the promise that they will be educated and that they will have a better standard of living. But that's often far from the case, unfortunately. And those orphanages make a lot of money out of keeping those children underfed, malnourished, and in very poor living conditions. And then they try and get fundraise against that. So sometimes those awful pictures that you see, they're like that for a reason, to try and get money. And so orphanages can often be very corrupt places. There's a lot of trafficking of children from orphanages as well, and places particularly like Cambodia. So what Tear Fund are trying to do in a way is to have those children repatriated, is probably the wrong word, but placed back with their families, and their families supported to look after them properly at home. Rather than sending them into these institutions. So it's for me, it's really important work.
Tremendous, and I just love your commitment to these different things, but just your heart and commitment for people in these other contexts. So as you mentioned, Sharon, Calais in northern France, and so had the privilege of being out with you last November, and what, you've been there loads of times, a dozen times or something, or lots of times,
I've lost count now.
volunteering with Care for Calais. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that particular work and what happens there, and your conviction behind it?
What we do, apart from learning to cook for large numbers of people, and
you cook a good feed for
and all vegetarian. Who would have thought? So I suppose when we started going out to Calais, the jungle itself was like a little village. It's where all of the refugees kind of came to. They had their own little shops and everything set up, made out of pallets, and it was, and I know a lot of the French authorities in particular were very against the jungle, and that, they felt, and the British government, and that it encouraged refugees to come to that part of the world and congregate there. But there were supports in that. We had 3 very old caravans that were kind of around in a little circle, and they were the first aid station. And I know people ask me, what would you have seen there from a first aid point of view? Like, what kind of treatment? So you have stuff like fleas and scabies and head lice and those kind of things, from people just who travel great distance. We would have seen trench foot, really bad, just nasty foot ulcers and so on, for people who just had very poor footwear, and were just walking and living in very poor condition. So we would have had that, but then we also had the beatings from the French police. So when these men would be trying to get onto lorries, or if they were trying to get onto the boats, if the French police found them, they beat them quite badly. So they'd have a lot of bruising. They also would injure themselves trying to jump onto trains and jump onto lorries. So we'd have a lot of hand injuries, a lot of cuts, and a lot of injuries that really should have been stitched, but they wouldn't go up to the hospital for me. So we were trying to manage all of that, and then, but I don't forget very easily the men when they would come in and say they would be badly bruised, or they'd be asking me to check for scabies, and they'd take off their shirt, and you'd see the amount of scars on their backs, in particular the Afghanistan men, who would have been, would have left because they were being persecuted by the Taliban. And you knew yourself, these men had awful stories to tell. You don't get scars like that for no reason. And it was so you would have those men from Afghanistan. You would have men, and it was mostly men. There were some women and children, but the women and children don't usually make it. So to Calais, the children, if they do, it's because they've managed to contain themselves as a family unit. A lone child to get to Calais is, they've come a long way without being trafficked or ending up elsewhere. So we would have had, in the jungle, we had some women and children, but it was definitely mostly men from Sudan, from Eritrea, from Nigeria, from countries that we read about, persecuted Christians day in, day out. And those people have to get through Libya, where they're often very badly tortured and terribly badly mistreated. And then they pay a smuggler to get onto a wee dinghy and go across the Mediterranean and hope that they make it. And when they do, they then have to try and make a journey up to Calais, all in the hope that they will get to the UK. And I know people ask, and I'm sure they ask you too, why do they all want to get there? Why do they all want to get to England? Well, number one, most of them are taught English at school because they're from what would have been ex-colonies. And so that's their second language, so they can communicate. Most Afghans can't speak French, but they can speak English. And the same with the Africans as well. So they like to go somewhere where they can converse. And they may well have friends and family that are in England as well. So, it's no different. If it was one of us, we would want to go to where there are people that we might know. And so they make treacherous journeys to try and get there. So that's it's very sad, I suppose. The bit, and I know you're thinking is the same as mine on this. We've done so much for the Ukrainians, and that's fantastic. It's not to take away from that. That's, they deserve all the support that they can get. But we had so many people who were lying in tents in Calais, and tents if they were lucky, as in if they hadn't been taken from them, who were sleeping outside for so long, and no one, opened up their homes or their countries to them.
Yeah. Totally, and thank you for sharing all of that, Sharon, because I mean the what refugees have to go through it's horrendous, and I think we're in danger of maybe within Ireland today, and we highlighted this at conference about the reality, the pressures on our housing within Ireland and then Ukraine, and maybe the danger that we get casual about the needs of others who just come from dire situations. It's so important to highlight. And it was a privilege to be out with you in Calais and to hear the stories of so many of the people involved. Of course, just acknowledge the Council on Social Responsibility of the Methodist Church and the Southern Executive Office. So basically, the group that looks at social issues for the Methodist Church for the Republic. I'm chairperson, Sharon is secretary. I don't know how I'd have done, at least in the last year especially, Sharon has had to make up for my inadequate working. But do you want to say anything about that, CSR, and the importance of keeping in touch with the social issues of today for the church, Sharon?
I'd say it's a very active group, as you know. We have some good, robust discussions at our meetings, and the papers that are produced or the position documents that come from that group, I'd say, are very, very accurate, very current, and give a number of different dimensions or thoughts as well, or thinking. Some of these things, and particularly those kind of issues that would be value-based or ethical issues, they're rarely black and white. And sometimes, yes, we will always go back to scripture as Methodists, as this is our manual here that guides us on these issues. But even with that, there's still varying opinions as to what the stand of the church is on these things. So the CSR itself, I suppose for me, I find it's not that we're tolerant, because as Christians we're not asked to be tolerant. We're asked to challenge, and isn't it in Timothy that we're told not to be timid on these things? So and the CSR does that. I think it certainly challenges us. Even your last piece that you had published in relation to the refugees and our 10 points on that, they certainly challenge, as in, it's one thing to put your hand in your pocket and to give a financial donation. It's quite another to open your front door and say, please come and stay with me. Those are things, and all you have to do is read the scripture and see when Jesus sent out his own disciples that they were to stay in a house that welcomed them. We're told that people have provided hospitality to angels and didn't know it. So it's there for us, and I think it makes, as a CSR, the fact that we have the scripture makes that committee probably easier perhaps than one that would be a secular committee, because we have guidance for our decisions.
Oh, totally, yeah. Well, thank you, Sharon. I think we've covered a lot of ground there, or maybe there's something else you wanted to say or share with us, but in my mind we've covered.
I think so. That's and thanks for the opportunity to share my little bits and pieces with anyone that might be interested.
Yeah. Oh, well, listen, we really appreciate your time, Sharon, and thank you for sharing all of that. And I'm sure people will maybe want to hear from you more. Maybe you'll be invited to speak somewhere. And
well, they know how to get me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sharon, and we wish you well for your new appointment and everything else you're involved with.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen.